Daily Words of God. How does God make man perfect? What is the disposition of God? And what is contained within His disposition? These must all be understood. This is spreading the name of God. It is bearing testimony to God and exalting God, and man will ultimately achieve changes in his life disposition upon the foundation of knowing God. The more dealing and refinement that man undergoes, the greater his strength, and the more numerous the steps of God's work, the more that man is made perfect. Today, in man's experience, each step of God's work strikes back at the conceptions of man, and every step is unimaginable by man's intellect and beyond his expectations. God provides all that is needed by man, and in every respect it is at odds with the conceptions of man. And when you are weak, God utters His words. Only in this way can He provide your life. By striking back at your conceptions, you come to accept the dealing of God, and only in this way can you get rid of your corruption. Today, in one respect, God incarnate works in divinity, and in another respect, He works in normal humanity. You should not deny any work that God does, and you should obey whatever God says or does in normal humanity. And no matter how normal He is, you should obey and understand. Only once you have actual experience can you know for sure that He is God, and stop producing conceptions and follow Him to the end. There is wisdom to God's work, and He knows how man can stand testimony to Him. He knows where man's vital weakness is, and the words He speaks can strike you at your vital weakness. But He also uses His majestic and wise words to make you stand testimony to Him. Such are the miraculous deeds of God. The work done by God is unimaginable by the intellect of man. The judgment of God reveals the kinds of corruption that man, being of the flesh, is possessed of, and what things are the essence of man, and it leaves man with nowhere to hide from his shame. God does the work of judgment and chastisement so that man may know Him, and for the sake of His testimony. Without His judgment of man's corrupt disposition, man would not know his righteous disposition that allows no offense, and could not turn his old knowledge of God into a new one. For the sake of His testimony, and for the sake of His management, He makes His entirety public, thus enabling man to achieve the knowledge of God and change his disposition, and bear resounding testimony to God through God's public appearance. Change is achieved in the disposition of man through different kinds of God's work. Without such changes in man's disposition, man would be unable to bear testimony to God, and could not be after God's heart. Changes in man's disposition signify that man has freed himself from Satan's bondage, has freed himself from the influence of darkness, and has truly become a model and specimen of God's work, has truly become a witness of God, and someone who is after God's heart. Today, God incarnate has come to do His work on earth, and He requires that man achieve knowledge of Him, obedience to Him, testimony to Him, know His practical and normal work, obey all of His words and work which do not accord with the conceptions of man, and bear testimony to all his work of saving man, and all the deeds he does that conquer man. Those who bear testimony to God must have a knowledge of God. Only this kind of testimony is accurate and real, and only this kind of testimony can shame Satan. God uses those who have come to know him through undergoing his judgment and chastisement, dealing and pruning, to bear testimony to him. He uses those who have been corrupted by Satan to bear testimony to him, and so too does he use those whose disposition has changed, and who have thus gained his blessings to bear testimony to him. He does not need man to praise him in word only, nor does he need the praise and testimony of the ilk of Satan, who have not been saved by him. Only those who know God are qualified to bear testimony to God, and only those whose disposition has changed are qualified to bear testimony to God, and God will not allow man to intentionally bring shame upon his name.